everyone, this is Miss Anne, and welcome to another Fairy Tale Fridays. So, this week, we're going to be talking about Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I think you guys might know the story about a young girl named Goldilocks who stumbles upon a house, goes inside it, and, just tries everything from chairs to beds to porridge. And, there's always one that's just a little too not right one way, another too not right the other way, and then something that is just right for her. So we're going to read from our classic fairy tale book here. And this one is called The Story of the Three Bears. It's not Goldilocks and the Three Bears. But we're going to read it, and you tell me if things are a little different than what you remember the classic Goldilocks story is. So let's begin. Once upon a time, there were three bears who lived together in a house of their own in a wood. One of them was a little small wee bear, or baby bear, and one was middle-sized, and the other was a great huge bear. They had each a pot of their porridge, a little pot for the little small wee bear, and a middle-sized pot for the middle bear, and a great big pot for the great huge bear. And they each had a chair to sit in, a little chair for the little wee bear, and a middle-sized chair for the middle bear, and the great chair for the great big bear. And they each had a bed to sleep in, a little bed for the little small wee bear, a middle-sized bed for the middle bear, and the great big huge bed for the great huge bear. One day, after they had made the porridge for their breakfast and poured it into their porridge pots, they walked out into the woods while the porridge was cooling, that they might not have burned their mouths, so they didn't want to burn themselves, by beginning to eat too soon. And while they were walking, a little old woman came to the house. She could not have been a good, honest old woman, for first she looked in at the house, and then she peeped in at the keyhole, and seeing nobody in the house, she lifted the latch. The door was not fastened because the bears were good bears, who did nobody any harm and never suspected that anybody would harm them. So the little old woman opened the door and went in, and she was very pleased when she saw the porridge on the table. If she had not been a good little old woman, she would have waited till the bears came home, and then perhaps they would have asked her to breakfast. For they were good bears, a little rough or so, as the manner of bear is, but for all intents and purposes, they were very good-natured and hospitable. But she was impudent, bad. She was an impudent, bad old woman, and set about helping herself. So first she tasted the porridge of the great huge bear, and that was far too hot for her. And she said a bad word about that. And then she tasted the porridge of the middle bear, and that was too cool for her. And she said a bad word about that too. And then she went to the porridge of the little wee bear and tasted that, and that was neither too hot nor too cold, but just right. And she liked it so well that she ate it all up. But the naughty old woman said a bad word about the little porridge pot, because it did not hold enough for her. So she was very angry. Then the little old woman sat down in the chair of the great huge bear, and that was far too hard for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the middle bear, and that was too soft for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So she seated herself in it, and there she sat till the bottom of the chair came out, and down she came, plump upon the ground. And the naughty old woman said a wicked word about that too. Oh, very, very nice. Then the little old woman went upstairs into the bedchamber in which the three bears slept, and first she lay down upon the bed of the great huge bear, but that was too high, and at the head for her. And next she lay down upon the bed of the middle bear, and that was too high at the foot for her. And then she lay upon the bed of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too high at the head nor the foot, nor low at the foot, but just right. So she covered herself up comfortably and lay there till she fell fast asleep. By this time the three bears thought their porridge would be cool enough, so they came home to breakfast. Now the little old woman had left the spoon of the great huge bear standing in his porridge. And he said, "Somebody has been at my porridge," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And when the little bear looked at his, he saw that the spoon was standing in it too. They were wooden spoons. If they had ever been silver ones, the naughty old woman would have put them in her pocket. "Somebody has been at my porridge," said the middle bear in his middle voice. Then the little small wee bear, looked at his, and there was the spoon in the porridge pot, but the porridge was all gone. "But somebody has been at my porridge and has eaten it all up," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. Upon this, the three bears, seeing that someone had entered their house and eaten up the little small wee bear's breakfast, began to look about them. Now the little old woman had not put the hard cushion straight when she rose from the chair of the great huge bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the great huge bear in his great gruff voice. And the little old woman squatted down the soft cushion of the middle bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the middle bear in his middle voice. And you know what the little old woman had done to the third, and you know what she did to the third chair. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair and has sat the bottom out of it," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. Then the three bears thought it necessary that they should make a farther search. So they went upstairs into their bedchamber. Now the little old woman had pulled the pillow of the great huge bear out of his place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the great huge bear in his great gruff voice. And the little old woman had pulled the bolster of the middle bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the middle bear in his middle voice. And when the little small wee bear came to look at his bed, there was the bolster in its place and the pillow in its place upon the bolster, and upon the pillow was the little old woman's ugly, dirty head, which was not in its place, for she had no business there. "Somebody has been lying in my bed, and here she is," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. The little old woman had heard in her sleep the great gruff voice of the great huge bear, but she was so fast asleep that there was no more to her than the roaring of wind or the rumbling of thunder. And she had heard the middle voice of the middle bear, but it was only as if she had heard someone speaking in a dream. But when she heard the little small wee voice of the little small wee bear, it was so sharp and so shrill that it awakened her at once. Up she started, and when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed, she tumbled herself out at the other and ran to the window. Now the window was open, because the bears, like good, tidy bears, as they were, always opened their bedchamber window when they got up in the morning. Out the little old woman jumped, and whether she broke her neck in the fall, or ran into the woods, or was lost there, or found her way out of the woods, and was taken up by the constable and sent to the house of corrections for a vagrant as she was, I cannot tell. But the three bears never saw anything of her ever again. And that is the story. It's a little different, right, than you might remember. In this one, it's not Goldilocks. They don't name her. It's just an old woman. But in the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, it's a little young girl, right? And she doesn't know any better. So that's a little different than the versions I've read myself. So now we have a picture book version. And this is titled Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And this is by Jane Brett. So you tell me if there's any differences that you noticed. We just read a classic fairy tale version and had some differences than you might remember. Now this one, I might skip a couple pages here and there, just so that we can get done at a reasonable time. But I'll definitely be able to show you some of the pictures. So once upon a time, there were three bears who lived together in a house of their own in a woods. Very similar to our other story. One of them was a little small wee bear, and one was a middle-sized bear, and the other was a great huge bear. They each had a bowl of porridge, a little bowl for the small little wee bear, a middle-sized bowl for the middle-sized bear, and a great huge bowl for the great huge bear. And they each had a chair to sit in, a little chair for the little small wee bear, a middle-sized chair for the middle bear, and a great huge chair for the great huge bear. And they each had a bed to sleep in, a little bed for the little small wee bear, a middle-sized bed for the middle-sized bear, and a great huge bed for the great huge bear. So this is very similar as we start out. But one day, after they had made their porridge for breakfast and poured it into their porridge bowls, they walked out into the woods while the porridge was cooling. So out they went. And while they were walking, a little girl named Goldilocks came to their house. First she looked in at the window, then she peeped in at the keyhole, and seeing no one was at home, she lifted the latch. The door opened before her, and in she went. So in this version, it's Goldilocks, a little girl. How pleased Goldilocks was when she saw the steaming porridge on the table. The sweet smell of the porridge with roasted nuts, honeys, and berries filled the room, and it was so tempting that Goldilocks set about helping herself. First she tasted the porridge of the great huge bear, but as we know, it was too hot. And then she tasted the porridge of the middle bear, and as we know, it was too cold. But that third pot from the small little wee bear, oh, it was just right, and she ate it all up. So, very similar to our other story. And then Goldilocks sat down in the chair of the great huge bear, and that was much too hard. But then she sat down in the chair of the middle-sized bear, and that was too soft. And then she sat down in the chair of the little small wee bear, and this chair was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So Goldilocks seated herself in it, and there she sat until the bottom of the chair gave way, and down she came, plump, upon the floor. In some other versions, you might know that the bears are the dad, the mom, or the baby bear. So this is actually more of a truer, classic than some of the other versions you might be reading. Well then, as you know, Goldilocks goes upstairs into the bedroom. First she lays upon the great huge bear, and that one was far too high for her head. Her head was way too high up. Next she lay down upon the bed of the middle-sized bear, and that one was too high, but with the feet. Oh, so this is very similar. Then she sat upon the bed of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too high nor too soft nor too low. It was just right. And so there she fell asleep. And as we know, our bears return. And our first bear, they start seeing all of the stuff messed with. And our huge bear says, "Oh, somebody has been eating at my porridge." And the middle bear says, "Somebody has been eating at my porridge." And our baby, our little small wee bear, says, "Somebody has been at my porridge and has eaten it all up." And now they go to the chairs, and again the huge bear says, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." And the middle-sized bear also says, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair." And our little bear, "Somebody has been sitting in my chair and has sat the bottom right out of it." Oh no. Now, as we know, they go upstairs, and our great huge bear, he notices something's amiss, and says, "Somebody has been lying in my bed." And then the middle-sized bear says, "Well, somebody's been lying in my bed." And then the little small wee bear came to look at his bed. There was Goldilocks sleeping peacefully, her long shiny braids spread across his pillow. Little small wee bear just stared at her for a moment and didn't say anything. But then he cried, "Somebody's been lying in my bed, and here she is." Goldilocks had heard in her sleep both the great rough voice, but that didn't wake her, and the middle-sized bear's voice. That still didn't wake her. But when she heard the little small wee voice of the little small wee bear, it was so sharp and so shrill and so like her own that it awakened her at once. Up she started, and when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed, she tumbled herself off the other and ran to the window. Out Goldilocks jumped and ran as fast as she could run, not looking behind her until she was very far away. So unlike our other version where the narrator had no idea what happened, if she hurt herself, if she ran, if she got locked up by the constable, in this version Goldilocks just jumps out the window and runs away. And what happened to Goldilocks afterwards, no one can tell. But the three bears never saw anything more of her. The end. So in this version, it's a very true adaptation. It's very similar, but you did notice, right? that in our first version, it was an old lady. In our second version, it was a very sweet, innocent young girl. But the question is, do you think she was right to go into the house? What do you think she should have done instead? That's, a question for you guys. And that's why these stories exist. They're about, teaching kids right from wrong. So what do you think the right thing is? What do you think the wrong thing is? Maybe she should have knocked on the door, and if nobody came, maybe she shouldn't have, opened the latch and walked in and, feasted on their breakfast, sat in their chairs and slept in their beds. Probably not the right thing to do. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed our Fairy Tale Fridays. We'll be back next week with another wonderful fairy tale. And of course, as always, we hope to see you very soon at our library. Until next time, have a great day and enjoy the fairy tales.